everybody. Welcome to another episode of the CRESI Ontario Landlord Series podcast, where we're here to talk about different topics for landlords in Ontario to understand processes, situations, options, how things need to be completed, and how they can do things moving forward with different situations. Today, we're speaking with a guest we've had on here before, Gibrian Malicki-Sanchez from Malicki-Sanchez Law Firm in Mississauga. They're great with real estate law. They cover all assets and facets of that, estates and wills. And they also get into collection of arrears or rent or other monies being owed by a tenant. And so today, what we're going to do is talk about the process, the procedures, and how to make sure we are able to collect our funds after we have gone to the board, received our order, and done everything properly beforehand. And now you're at this point, you have that order. We're going to bring in Gibrian here to tell us what happens, how we go through this. So welcome back, Gibrian. How are you doing today?
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me, Kevin. I'm very excited to talk about this topic that you brought me on to speak about.
Yeah, sadly, it's something that people are always curious about. Hopefully they never get into the situation where they have to get to this, but it is inevitable that landlords do have to collect rents, whether it was eviction of non-payment or utilities that didn't get paid or whatever. A landlord is owed monies for after tenancy has been terminated. So yeah, what do we do once we have that order from the LTB?
Right. So I do a lot of litigation at my firm on the landlord and tenant level, small claims court level, and higher levels of court as well. So I've got experience doing everything from beginning to the end. Now, we like landlords, right? You work for landlords. I represent landlords and tenants. I'm a landlord myself, and we know why landlords invest. Okay, it's to make some money. And landlords, they also understand the risk of investing, because what they're doing is that they're dealing with other people in a contractual relationship. So when the other party breaches the contract and ends up owing the landlord money, then the landlords, they rely on the power of the justice system to remedy the situation through enforceable orders to collect the money that is owed. So, yeah, today I am going to talk about what enforcing an order looks like from the perspective of Ontario landlords, specifically the landlord and tenant board orders where the tenant owes money, be it for non-payment of rent or damage to property. Okay, so in these kinds of landlord and tenant board orders that set out the money owed, it sets out how much was awarded based on the application, plus the application fee, plus the interest that accrues on the non-payment of the order. Okay, so the landlord and tenant board actually doesn't have the jurisdiction to enforce monetary orders. They can do everything else like evictions, okay, but the jurisdiction of collecting on monetary orders falls under the small claims court. Okay, and that's why the highest amount that a landlord could collect from a tenant is $35,000, because that's the jurisdictional limit of the small claims court. So hopefully no landlords are in a position where the tenant owes them over $35,000, because they're not going to get an enforceable order for anything above that amount. All right, so getting the order at the landlord and tenant board is the first part. It's the easy part. Now the heavy lifting begins. All right. So the first thing that you want to do once you get the landlord and tenant board order is to file it at the small claims court with a small claims court form called the certificate of judgment. All right. That puts in all the financial information from the landlord and tenant board order, and then they give you a judgment back with a small claims court file number and the very important small claims court seal on it. So now you can take that small claims court order and enforce it. So the small claims court offers 4 enforcement options. The first is garnishment. The second is writ of seizure and sale of personal property. The third is writ of seizure and sale of land. And the fourth is writ of delivery. Now, practically, the only one that landlords would use is garnishment. So I'm just going to focus on that.
Yeah, I actually do have a couple of landlords or tenants, sorry, that are landlords elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? They live in an area where they can't afford, and they rent elsewhere. So if they were to ever fall behind, technically, you could make them sell their property that they have elsewhere. But that is a very rare case. I think that somebody that is a property owner, landlord somewhere else, that they would fall behind in rent or purposely get to this point. So yeah, you're
That's
probably right. I think the only thing that we would have to use here in this type of instance would be something like garnishment.
Yeah, in most situations, tenants aren't landowners, but you're right. There are a number of them who are landowners, and that's great because that gives you another enforcement option, and especially if you know where their property that they're on title is, then you can file a writ of seizure and sale of land in that jurisdiction. Essentially, you put an execution against that person in that land registry office, and then anytime a lawyer does a title search, which they need to do when that person tries to refinance or sell that property, the lender or the buyer will require the vendor, so the tenant who owns that property, to pay off that execution at the time that they do the registration or the sale. So there's a whole process there, which we can talk about for 15 minutes on another day. But yeah, this is just good to know. So yeah, the most common one is garnishment. So what is garnishment? Well, that means that you serve somebody with a notice of garnishment who owes the debtor money. Okay. And in this case, the debtor is the tenant who owes you money. They become the judgment debtor. So the most often are people who are the employer or the bank. Those are the two most common people who owe the debtor money. So you can garnish from them. So to complete the process, you just have to fill in a couple of forms, the affidavit of enforcement request and the notice of garnishment, and then file them at court. And once they're approved, then you have to serve them on the employer with the garnishee's statement return. Okay. When you do that, the bank, let's say you serve it on the bank, they will pay the money into court, and the court will hold it for 30 days and then pay it out to anybody who has um, registered a garnishment at the court, just like you did, in pro rata share of everybody equally. If you serve it on the employer, then they'll garnish the the debtor's salary at a rate of 20% per paycheck.
That's what I was going to just say right there. Is there a limit that or a set amount that you can garnish or whatever, right? And so there you go, 1/5, 20%.
Yeah. And then another consideration is, well, what if somebody only owns a jointly owned bank account, right? They're on it with somebody else. Then you can only garnish up to 50% the amount, up to half.
Okay, of what's in their bank account is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, gotcha.
So you want to do all this without tipping off the debtors so that they don't pull out all their money, right? Got to be savvy about it.
Yeah, they would probably know this is all coming anyways, right? But when you're thinking about garnishment of wage, that's probably what's going to happen, where you're thinking about getting 20% of their paycheck until they're paid off. We have, I spoke to a landlord the other day when we were talking about having this topic, and they said, yeah, they had to evict somebody in previous, and after 6 months of non-paid rent and thousands of dollars being owed, they're collecting $300 a month, and they've been months collecting it. And it has been being paid back, which I think is great that they were able to get into the situation. Can you enforce something? Well, I guess as long as you have your order from the board, the next step is just how you're going to get it back, right?
Yeah.
You will approve everything basically at the next stage.
Yeah, so long as you fill in your forms correctly. So it's advisable to get a legal professional who has experience doing this to complete the forms for you because they can be a little bit technical, especially with the calculations. And any error, it's going to be sent back to you and it could get frustrating. So might as well just get it done the first time. And, you save yourself the time. We do all the serving, the filing. So you don't even have to worry about any of that. It's just all back end stuff, which is good.
And it's
The
an expense for landlords as well, right? To bring yourself or somebody on in this type of a situation rather than trying to go at it themselves. It is something that a lot of landlords try to do, I think, is to rectify a situation where they're losing money without spending any money. They just keep about thinking about, oh, I've already lost this much. I don't want to spend more. But like in everything where people have to realize the number to be most concerned about is what you're going to net, right? And the worst thing is to lose money, spend more and lose more and take longer to get through everything with this. So again, professionals are always best to be used, and their fees are well worth it. I can assure you that. Sorry, Gibrian, continue on here.
That's right. And you know, you're touching on something where knowing what the end result looks like will really help the beginning. Okay. Because you don't want to throw good money after bad, and you want to know what kind of person you're dealing with. If they're an employee, that's helpful. If they make money in another way, that could be more challenging. And that's why getting all this information up front in the tenant application is also very helpful. Like, you know, who's their employer, what's their contact information, um, where do they bank, where's the bank institution number, what's their bank account number, so that you'll have this information ready for you if you need to garnish. And I'd also suggest that you be careful of fraud. There are some professional tenants out there which will forge these forms or will provide false information. So it'd be prudent just to look up the bank and see where it's located and see if it makes sense or where their employer is and if the story sort of adds up, so that you don't get false information and are left scrambling later.
You're talking at the beginning here when you're placing the tenant and you're selecting one during the screening process to go through everything to make sure that what's on that application is correct and truthful.
Yeah, yeah, that's it's an important part when screening tenants.
I
So
got a I got a buddy of mine to make me a pay stub saying that I work for the Toronto Blue Jays and make $800,000 a year on the employee letter. Just whenever I have a tenant that says to me, "Why do you need that information?" I go, "Well, this is why we double check everything because I don't work for the Blue Jays, but it sure does look like I do, right?" And I can
yeah.
just be a little tongue in cheek back with them so they understand what's going on and not be as serious, but be serious enough that they need to know that I require this information and that I will be checking up on them.
Yeah, for sure. And using public databases, even like seeing if there's any landlord and tenant board judgments against them, will help tip you off if this person is like a professional tenant who just takes advantages of landlords and gives them fake information and runs off. Uh,
Yes, we have a few tools out there right now that they have, which is great. Public sites. I'll throw in a plug here for Front Lobby. That's the system that we use. They're great. They screen everything, criminal checks, Equifax, everything, so we can see who it is. But you still should be looking into this everything because once a tenant is in, they are in, and getting them out if they are a poor tenant is not easy. But back to the topic here where we were with collecting our funds and garnishing their wages.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that if you're going to proceed with enforcement, that the debtor is not judgment proof. And by that we means somebody is judgment proof if they don't have a source of income that could be garnished, or they don't have assets or a bank account that can be seized. Okay, because then you're going to go through this entire process and you're going to come out with somebody with empty pockets. And it's like, well, you can't, like they say, you can't take blood out of a stone, right? So if you do attempt to garnish a bank account and there's no money in there, consider if it's worthwhile considering other options. Um, Another thing that you can do is if you are missing some information from a tenant from the tenant application, or if you want to get some updated information, you can serve a notice of examination on them, where they have to appear at court and give testimony, answer questions under oath. And these are all financial questions about, do you expect to pay the debt? What other debts do you owe? What's your budget like? Um, you know, what are all your sources of income, bank account information? What are all of your assets? Okay. And I just want to say it's also good to get their driver's license number or their driver's license period, because like when we're dealing with a tenant and they move out, it could be hard to locate them and serve them with these documents. But with the driver's license number, if they update their driver's license, then their new address will be updated. And, somebody like a skip tracer can be hired to pull public information to find people. And that's one tool that I use in order to locate people who've sort of disappeared. And I found them, and then I can start serving them and proceeding with the process. Because once you serve somebody and they don't attend at an examination hearing, they're essentially they could be found to be in contempt of a court order. And if you keep going down that road and asking the court to find them in contempt, the court can issue a warrant of committal, and that means that the police, if they arrest, like if they pull this person over and run them through their system, they'll see that there's a warrant out to arrest them, and then they will bring them to court, and then the representative will be notified to go to the court to examine them. And so nobody wants to, like, live looking over their shoulder or being unable to sleep at night, taking one false move and they're going to be arrested by the police and start having these problems.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, just before we get into the next one here, self-employed then, that would be something obviously that would be hard to garnish a wage because they don't have an employer paying them, or are we looking at their annual incomes? How would that work?
Yeah, that's tough, because again, you can garnish anybody who owes the debtor money. And so when we're talking about a contractor or somebody who's self-employed, who's doing business with other people, then you'll have to serve the person who owes them money through the contract. All right. So it really kind of depends on what the self-employed person is doing and who you're going to be serving. Okay. Because again, you don't have judgment against the corporation, but if they are incorporated, that can help, because somebody like me who works in a general practice firm, I have access to corporate searches. So I can see where the registered head office is. I could see who are the directors are, so it would help me locate them. I could also do real estate searches to see if they own other properties. But basically, like, again, it's going to depend on the kind of work that they do. How piecemeal is their job? Are they like just a plumber, right? And it's like quick one-offs, or do they like do bigger projects? And it becomes challenging because, like, again, you need to get that information. So you can get that information from them at one of those examination hearings I was telling you about. Otherwise, like, you might want to hire a private investigator to try to track them down, but that starts getting costly. So if you want to rent out to somebody who's self-employed, just know that it's a lot more challenging to try to garnish from them than it is from somebody who's employed.
It's a great piece there, right? About what we can do there and how we can get after them. Because already, I think a lot of landlords look at self-employed and they want to see more records and everything like that, just because they're unsure about the actual income. And most people I know that are self-employed try to make as little money as possible on paper and do what they need to do that way as well. So it's also not showing well. But
Yeah. And also consider people on ODSP. You can't garnish that. So you might want to help them out. You might think that it's guaranteed payment from the government, but I don't like, I'm not saying to filter them out. Not at all. I'm just saying, like, down the road, if you want to enforce, consider like you're probably not going to proceed with the enforcement against them.
yeah, it'll be hard to collect for sure, right? Like you said earlier, you can't get blood from a stone.
Mm-hmm.
But what I don't know if people know about the ODSP thing is that at any time, even though you're getting that check directly from the government to yourself as the landlord or to your property manager, whatever the way they direct it, it has to be the person on ODSP who speaks to their worker, who directs the worker to say, okay, instead of giving me the 2,000, send 1,800 to CRESI Property Management so that they can take care of my rent, and then send me the remainder $200.
Mm-hmm.
At any point, if that tenant turns to their worker and says, change my mind, send me that $2,000 again instead of to them, there's nothing that we can do. And now we have to start collecting that from the tenant. And if they are not going to be paying us or anything like that, like you mentioned, now we're in a little bit of hot water.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what did we talk about today? Well, we talked about the life cycle of enforcing after you get the order from the landlord and tenant board, how you file it with the small claims court so you can proceed with enforcement. We dove into garnishment and where you can get that money from. And we talked about strategies that you can use when you are trying to bring in a tenant through their application, get that key information, and then deciding whether or not you want to proceed with enforcement or just cut your losses there. Sound good, Kevin?
Yeah, no, I think as always, it's a decision that people have to make whether they're going to spend more money to try to collect or if they're just going to walk away from that amount and write it off as a business loss. But if you can get it back, why not go get it back, right? But understanding who your tenant is and their ability to repay it, I think is the most important thing here when we're looking at it. Landlords, if you guys have any questions about this, you can always reach out to us and we can connect you with Gibrian. If you want to go right to their firm as well, you can do so. They're located in Mississauga, Sanchez Malicki Law Firm, Cawthron Lakeshore there, and we'll flash his information around here, and it'll probably be listed somewhere below so that everybody that watches this or the other podcasts that Gibrian's been on can connect with them. Hope that made sense to people. I hope you learned something there. I hope that you understand at least what's going to happen if you ever get into the situation. But I think using somebody like Gibrian to make sure you are collecting and being guided, advised, and consulted throughout this process, once you get to that point, is the best thing that you can do. Thanks so much for joining us, Gibrian. I appreciate your wisdom, and we will talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. Have a good one.
Bye for now, everybody.
Please remember, while we are professionals, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The advice shared may not apply to your unique situation. Always seek personalized advice from a qualified professional before making any investment decisions.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're finding it informative and useful, make sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend so that we can keep getting the information out there to Ontario landlords. And keep on joining us. We'll see you next time.